in today's class, we'll talk about other measures of elasticity that we haven't discussed yet, right? So one is known as, there are two more measures of elasticity that we'll talk about. The first one is known as cross elasticity of demand, right? And the other one is known as income elasticity of demand, right? So these are two more measures of elasticity that we will cover in today's class. Cross elasticity of demand, that's fairly simple and easy one to understand, cross elasticity of demand, right? And the other one that we'll talk about in today's class is income elasticity of demand. Okay, now think about this. So let's first talk about cross elasticity of demand. So cross elasticity of demand captures the responsiveness of demand for a product due to change in the price of another product, right? So what is that capturing? So cross elasticity of demand is capturing the change in demand for one good due to change in the price of the other good, due to change in the price of the other thing, right? So if I have to write down the formula, so cross elasticity of demand is basically the short form for cross elasticity of demand is XED, and that is equals to percentage change in quantity demanded, percentage change in quantity demanded for any product, let's say A, divided by percentage change in price of B, right? Now, what are these two products? Obviously, the two products need to be related. In what sense can they be related? So either the two products are substitute of each other or the two products are complementary goods of each other, right? Either the two goods are complementary goods or they are substitutes, right? Now think about this. If we take a very simple example, right, of fuel price and let's say the demand for cars, we do know that these two things are, right? Fuel and cars are complementary goods. You can't use one without the other, right? And you have demand for cars, right? Now, if fuel prices are going up in any country, like we have seen recently in Pakistan, fuel prices have hiked, right? So what will that do? That will cause the demand for cars to decrease, right? But by how much? We do know just by the law of demand and all that we have discussed previously, that higher price of a complementary good would reduce the demand for the other thing, right? But how much will be the change in the demand for cars due to a certain increase or decrease in fuel prices? That is what the cross elasticity of demand will capture for you, right? Is this making sense, right? So first thing that you have to understand, the first thing that you need to understand is that the two variables will move in opposite direction. Hello, Zohan, how are you? The two variables will move in opposite direction, right? So think about this. Walaikum assalam, I'm good, thank you. So let's say you have price of fuel on the y-axis, right? So Zohan, we are talking about cross elasticity of demand. So you have fuel of price of fuel on the y-axis, and you have quantity demanded of cars, right? Now, if fuel prices are going up, what will that do to the demand for cars? That will cause the demand for cars to be low. So higher the fuel price, lower the demand for cars, and vice versa, right? So have a look at this. If I choose any random points on this curve, now what I can see here is that, think about this, when the fuel price was high, let's say 150 rupees per liter, right? So let's say each year 1 million cars were being demanded in Pakistan, right? 1 million new cars were being bought and sold in Pakistan. Now if, right, per liter, right? So if that fuel price then in future decreases to something less than this, right? So let's say lower than 150 to 120 or something of the sort, right? When that happens, right, what will that do to the demand for cars? Obviously, the demand for cars will increase, right? Now, let's say 2 million cars are being demanded, and similarly, if the price drops down even further, so the demand for cars will increase even further, right? So what it actually shows us is that the price of fuel and cars, demand for cars have inverse relationship. Yes or no? Right? No, Zohan, just read the label of the axis, right? So it's price of fuel on the price of fuel. So it's not the demand curve for any one product. Are you getting me? Yeah, you're very right. So if we would have been looking at the demand for cars, demand curve for cars, then on the y-axis we would have had price of cars, but that's not the case over here. So we have price of fuel, right, and demand for cars. So it's technically neither the demand curve for cars, neither it's the demand curve for fuel. It's basically a hybrid graph that I've made. John, did you get me? Right? Yes. In the normal case where I'm looking at the demand for cars, yes, then there will be a leftward shift in the demand for cars when fuel prices increase because, right? Because now when fuel is more expensive, lesser quantities of cars will be demanded. Johan, did you get me here or not? Right? Quantity demand for cars, right? So for a normal downward sloping demand curve for cars, when the fuel gets expensive, the demand for cars will shift to the left. Yeah, that's correct, right? Then the product's relationship will be substitutes. No, if it's negative, it's complementary goods. If it's positive, then it's substitute. Think about this, students. Zwan, have a look at this. So if fuel prices are going up, what will happen to the demand for cars? If fuel prices are going up, as you can see, what will happen to the demand for cars? The demand for cars will fall. Yes or no? Got it? So yeah. So for complementary goods, think about this. In cross elasticity of demand, for complementary goods, the relationship, the overall sign of cross elasticity of demand will be negative, right? Khadija, are you following me? Do let me know if there is any part that you find confusing. Okay, students, let's do a quick recap and then move forward from here. Then, so today we started off with this new topic, which is known as cross elasticity of demand. So far, we have talked about what is price elasticity of demand, which shows responsiveness of a product demand due to change in its price. Then we talked about price elasticity of supply, which shows responsiveness of quantity supplied due to change in product price, right? And we talked about what are the factors that affect PED, what are the factors that affect PES. Then we looked at the graphs for both of these elasticity, right? Then we also talked about the calculations. How do we calculate PED? How do we calculate PES? What factors affect and blah, 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 all that stuff, right? Now, in today's class, we have to cover two more measures of elasticity, which are cross elasticity of demand, the one that we are discussing right now. And then after this, we'll talk about income elasticity of demand. Now, what is cross elasticity of demand? So the notation that we use for cross elasticity of demand is XED, right? Cross elasticity of demand. Now, what it captures basically that how much responsive is the demand for a product, for any product, let's say A, due to change in the price of another product, which is B, right? So percentage change in quantity demanded for A divided by percentage change in price for B. That's what cross elasticity of demand captures, right? So think about this. Excuse me. If fuel and cars are complementary goods. So you use both the products together. You can't use one without the other. If fuel price is going up, the demand for cars will decrease. That's very intuitive because now using a car is more expensive with higher fuel prices, so the demand for cars should go down. So therefore, the overall relationship that you'll get for complementary goods is negative. The overall sign that you'll get will be negative, right? Right? We'll come to substitute goods in a bit, but first of all, have a look at this. But how much is the change? That is what we're about to look at. Now, moving forward, one thing that you need to know, right? So if you have these pair of complementary goods, and that will help you better understand, right? Coffee and sugar, right? And let's say the third one is tea and biscuits, right? Okay, now think about this. If these are the three pair of complementary goods, right? And I'm giving you three values, you have to match these values with the correct pair of goods. Okay, now let's say this is, right? This is, right? Okay, and this is, let's say, okay. Now, if you have to compare these, if you have to match these values with the correct pair of goods, which do you think would be for the first one? What do you think? So which of these three values would be for the fuel and car, and why? Right? Right. So Zohan is saying, who replied? Right? Zohan is saying that this is for the fuel and car. Right? Do you all agree with this? Zohan, can you give us an explanation for that? Right. Khizr is also saying the same. Right. So what's the explanation, students? Because the fuel and car will be more elastic. Okay. Okay. Makes sense. Right. Greater than one is more elastic. So you're saying it's more elastic, but still I'm looking for an explanation that why do you expect these to be more elastic? There has to be a reason, right? Yeah. Okay, now forget about this. Forget about this debate. Think about this. Out of these three pair of complementary goods, which of the three do you think is the strongest relationship? Which of the three is the strongest? Right, very much, very much. Good explanation, Khizr. So Khizr is saying that they are necessary for each other. Which of these three pairs is the strongest? Which of these three pairs is the strongest complementary good? Can you guys answer that for me? So which two pairs of goods cannot work without one and two? But even out of one and two, which one is even stronger? Come on, think about this. One is even stronger. Like using a car without fuel is impossible. Whereas a lot of people I know who drink sugar, or sorry, who drink coffee without sugar, right? So it's, I mean, that is also a stronger one, but not as strong as fuel and car, or not as strong as air conditioner and electricity. Yes or no? Because in these two pairs, in AC and electricity, and for fuel and car, you can't use one product without the other, right? So what uses electricity if you do not have an electronic appliance? Similarly, what uses AC if you do not have electricity, and vice versa, right? But a lot of people can consume coffee without sugar, right? So I would say, if you ask me, right, and tea without biscuits will contribute exactly, right, right. No, Zohan, your answer was correct. So it will still be negative 0. I'm coming to that point, right? So the biggest value, the more strong relationship between complementary goods, the bigger the value, the greater the value. And you know, whenever we are comparing the values, we ignore the negative sign. So you don't have to look at the negative sign. So in absolute terms, do you understand what absolute is? Absolute means ignoring the negative or the positive sign. So ignoring the sign, if you look at these three values, which is the biggest value of these three, 1.57. So I would say 1.57 would be for this. Then coffee and sugar are still relatively, coffee and sugar are still relatively, stronger complementary goods, because most people, if not all, most people prefer to have coffee with sugar. Yes or no? And then the weakest of the three is tea and biscuits, because not always when you have tea, you have biscuits, right? So this is the weakest of the three. The relationship between the two complementary goods is weakest between tea and biscuits, and therefore the value is the smallest. Got it? Students, are you getting me? Any confusion so far? Get fuel. No, Zohan, that's the mistake you're making. No. So if fuel is inelastic, now think about it. Zohan question is basically that if fuel has inelastic demand because fuel is necessity, perhaps that is the thing that is bothering you. Yes or no? Zohan, is that the thing what's bothering you? That it's a necessity, so people have to buy it no matter what. I totally agree with you. But think about this. Here we are not looking at how the change in price of one product will affect its demand. So in the price elasticity of demand, we used to look at how much will be the change in demand due to change in that product price alone. How much will be the change in the demand for that good due to change in the price of that product only, right? So we had nothing else to compare. But in cross elasticity of demand, we're looking at the change in the demand for one product due to change in the price of product B, right? So change in demand for product A due to change in price of product B. So we are technically capturing their relationship. We are capturing the relationship between two pair of goods. Does it make sense? Go on. So whichever of the two is stronger, because let me put it down like this. If there is 1% increase in the price of fuel, what 1.57 basically shows that for 1% increase in the price of fuel, how much will be the decrease in demand for cars? There will be 1.57% decrease in the fuel demand for cars, which is a bigger number compared to this. If sugar is getting expensive, right? So if sugar is getting expensive, so perhaps the demand for coffee might not go down because people might cut on sugar. Sugar is already, as per researchers, it's not very healthy, right? So sugar, what I was saying, that sugar, coffee can be consumed without sugar, but fuel, car can't be used without fuel, right? So this is a bigger value, so that's why it's a stronger relationship. That's why it has a bigger value, right? And this is not very strong, coffee and sugar, so that's why the value is not that big. And finally, this is where the third one lies. Right, there's no elastic or inelastic, right? Technically, you can still use the language elastic, but elastic basically means responsiveness, right? Zohan, where you are getting confused, you are thinking only about elastic and inelastic, about necessity and luxury. You're only thinking about elastic and, elastic being a luxury, which is basically it's not that much of a need, and necessity being less elastic. That's why you are getting confused. If you think about this, in the case of supply, the notation was very different. In the case of price elasticity of supply, that only captures how easily you can produce more goods. So if you can easily produce more goods, so supply will be more elastic. If you cannot easily produce goods, the supply will be less elastic. So try to think about elasticity as response of one variable on another variable. Are you getting me? So let me give you another example and then you'll get a better idea. Okay. Right. So have a look at this. Okay, now you tell me. So if these are the two pair of goods, right, which of the two will have a stronger elasticity? Which of the two will have a stronger relationship? First of all, answer me. Which of the two will have a stronger relationship? Is it coffee and grades? Is it hours spent studying in a year and A levels grades or grades? Which of the two will have a stronger relationship? What do you think? Right? Right? Is this making sense? So obviously, right, it is this thing that will have more direct effect on your grades because that totally explains how many hours a person spends studying and so on, right? So coffee is not really a good indicator of how hard you are studying. Yes or no? Are you getting? Because the two things are not that much related. Are you getting? So that is how you need to be, Khadija, right? Is everyone getting? Right, Zen? So coming back to the point, when we talk about that, if a person consumes more coffee, would he also get more grades, he or she, right? Most probably. I mean, there's no direct relationship. So, I mean, the value is really small. If we calculate the data of students who, like how many cups of coffee they had during a certain year and what grades they get, it will be more of a random numbers, right? Some people study with a lot of coffee, some people studies without any coffee, right? I mean, there's technically no hard and fast there's no strong relationship between these two variables. But when it comes to this variable, obviously it's directly related. If you spend more hours, right, studying, then you'll have, there's a greater chance, not always, but still there's a greater chance if you're studying so many hours in a year, you will have better grades, right? As simple as that. So that is what cross elasticity of demand captures. Students, are you absolutely clear? So that is what the cross elasticity of demand is capturing, that if the price of a product is changing, how will that affect the demand for the other thing? Now, let me give you one last example and then move forward. So if I say price of fuel and demand for laptops. Okay, now think about this. If I want to capture the relationship between these two variables, now you tell me that if the fuel prices are changing, right, and we want to capture that, what effect will this have on the demand for laptops, right? Can you tell me what relationship can you expect? So if the fuel price is changing, how will that affect the demand for laptops? That's my question, right? So exactly, hardly there would be any relationship. That's why the value would be perhaps 0.00001 or 2, right? I mean, very small. Why? Because technically there's no relationship. Neither laptop uses fuel, nor you use these two products simultaneously, nor they are substitutes of each other, right? I mean, there's no connection. So when there is no connection between the two things, then cross elasticity of demand will have a very low value, right? When the relationship, Zohan, did you get this? So when the relationship between two products is not very strong enough, and strong, I mean, it could be either complementary goods or substitutes, because substitutes is also something that we captured in cross elasticity of demand, which I'll explain you in a bit. Between two products is not strong enough, then XCD value will be close to 0, right? Otherwise, it will be a bigger value. 0, and on the opposite, relationship is strong, is strong, then XCD value will be high. Yes or no? Is everyone clear on this? So that's what you need to remember. Easy? We got on this? Any confusion? Right. Rise leading to in price of laptops. No, but we're not capturing price of laptops, and that will affect the um, demand for cars. Okay, so you're saying if fuel is getting expensive, that will increase the cost of transportation, and if the cost of transportation increases, that will increase the price of laptops, and that would result in decrease in demand for laptops. I mean, yes. Since that weak relationship will exist, Zuhan, but that's why the value is not completely zero. Because if there would have been absolutely no relationship, then the value would have been completely zero. Yes or no? But here the value might exist something, but it will not be very huge. Right, perfect. Is everyone clear on this? Khadija? Zen, Khizr, are we good on this? Right? So what basically cross elasticity of demand captures is that responsiveness means how much strong is the relationship. So if the two products are more directly related, there will be a bigger value of cross elastic demand. If the relationship exists, but that is not very strong, what we were discussing over here, then the value will be slightly lower, right? Are you getting me? So for coffee and sugar, it was 0.85 because it will change, but not that much. For fuel and car, it's a higher value because they directly affect each other, right? And for tea and biscuits, it will hardly affect. Why? Because some people obviously prefer to have biscuits always when they have tea, but that's for very few people, not for everyone. Got it? Okay. I mean, that depends on, obviously that will affect. So if New Zealand plans to ban cigarettes, firstly, it's not a good idea to do that because I mean, then there might be other products that the people start consuming. So banning a product is always a bad policy, economics point of view. And that will also obviously affect their GDP because if there are no sales of such a major product. But I mean, that compensates, right? So it's just like saying that, when one product is not available, people switch to other products, right? So I mean, not necessarily, it will give them some dip in the economy because all the jobs that were related with cigarette manufacturing or cigarette distribution or cigarette packaging, those will be gone. But I mean, then there might be other alternatives, right? So the consumption of alcohol might go up, or the consumption of, nicotine gums might go up, and yeah, it will encourage black market. Definitely, that's the reason why. That's the reason why completely banning a product is not always a recommended policy, right? Got it? We good? Students, can you move on? Okay. Now, this being said, let's also talk about the substitute goods. Now, for the substitute goods, we know that the two products are serving the same purpose, and you can use one instead of other, right? So substitute goods, right? So think about this. If you have, let's say, right, if you have coffee and, I mean, the coffee and tea, right? That's one example of substitute goods. Then you have Pepsi and Coke, or Pepsi or any other soft drink, right? And stuff like that, right? So these are basically examples of substitute goods. Yes or no, right? Now, if one thing is becoming expensive, so if I'm capturing the effect of price of tea, right? So that I can predict how much will be the change, or I'm recording how much effect of price of tea would have on the demand for coffee, then this is also part of cross elasticity of demand, right? Okay, now think about this. If tea becomes more expensive, obviously the demand for coffee will go up because, I mean, these are kind of substitutes. So if tea is becoming more expensive, people might switch to coffee, and vice versa. If tea is becoming cheaper, price of tea goes down, the demand for coffee will go down because people will switch to consuming tea, and they will consume less coffee. So the two variables are going in similar direction. So when it's increased for both of them. If it's decreased for both of them, decrease for both of them, right? So this is known as what? This is known as, it will have a value, positive value, right? So for substitute goods, positive sign. Cross elasticity of demand will always be positive. Students, are you getting me? Right, HP laptop or Dell laptop, right? Different brands and the same product, right? Coffee and tea, fuel and electricity, electric cars, right? And stuff like that. Are we good on this, students? Is it making sense? Is there any confusion? Please ask me, right? So basically, cross elasticity of demand, as I said, it's very simple, right? But you have to understand what is happening. First thing that you need to understand, that what's the formula. So for cross elasticity of demand, it captures the percentage change in demand for any one variable A due to change in the price of the other variable B, right? Now we calculate cross elasticity of demand. Either we can calculate it for complementary goods or for substitute goods. So for complementary goods, the sign will be negative because if fuel price goes up, right, demand for cars will decrease, right, and vice versa, right? And on the other hand, for substitute goods, the sign will always be positive. Why? Because if one thing becomes expensive, you'll start using the other product. So if Dove shampoo is becoming expensive, you'll switch to some other brand of shampoo and so on, right? So it will always have a positive sign, it will always have a negative sign. So just by looking at the value of cross elasticity of demand, right? So just by looking at the value of cross sign, right? Not the value, sorry, sign. Just by looking at the sign, we can tell whether it's substitute good or whether it's complementary good, right? Now think about this. If we have these four values, right? So first of all, you can tell this is for product A. This is for pair of goods, because cross elastic demand is not for one product, right? So let's say this is for pair A and B, this is for pair C and D, right? This is for pair E and F, and this is for pair F, C, D, A, B, B, C, whatever it is, G, H, right? Okay, nothing about this. The idea is that by looking at the sign, positive sign, we can tell that A and B are what? A and B are substitute goods or complementary goods? A and B are, just by looking at the positive sign, we can tell that A and B are substitutes, right? I'll just explain you. Positive sign is for substitute goods, right? When just think about this. I mean, I know it's hard to memorize like that. So the best way that you should do is, right? So the best way you should do is, where did that slide go? Right? So the best way to do that, did I miss that slide? Okay, so the best way to do that is just to look at, just to do a quick example. So higher the price of fuel, right? Higher the price of Pepsi, higher will be the price of Coke. So the two are going in the same direction. Higher the price, higher the demand, higher the price of Pepsi, higher the demand for Coke, right? So they are going in the same direction, right? Always use these things that will help you understand. Higher the price of Pepsi, higher the demand for Coke, right? So they're going in same direction. On the other hand, if Pepsi becomes cheaper, people will reduce the demand for Coke because they will switch to Pepsi. So they're again going in the same direction. Yes or no? Does it make sense? So this is substitute. Again, this is substitute because it's positive, and these two are complementary goods, right? Now, apart from this, what we can tell by looking at the values, that this is a strong relationship, strong pair of substitute goods, like Pepsi and Coke. This is also substitute goods, but that's not very strong. So let me give you an example of substitutes that are not very strong. So think about this. If you compare Milo with, if you compare Milo with something like, what's that called? Give me an example, right? So perhaps Coke or Pepsi, right? So I mean, the two things have very different purpose, right? So Milo is more of an energy drink when you're playing games and stuff like that. That's when you drink Milo. And Coke, on the other hand, is normally consumed with junk food and stuff like that, right? So I mean, very few people you'll see having Milo when they're having a burger, or when they're having a pizza, they're drinking Milo. I mean, you can find some anomalies, right? But normally it doesn't happen like that. Yes or no? Right, making sense? So there's a weak connection. Okay, now again for these two, um, for this period of complementary goods, because it's a negative sign, we know it's a complementary good, right? So it could be perhaps fuel and car, where there's a stronger relationship because 1.5 is a bigger value compared to 0.2, right? And this could be for, let's say, complementary goods but not very strong, as I was saying, the example of, let's say, tea and biscuits, right? So some people might prefer to have that, but not that much, but not everyone. Yes or no? Easy, students, are we good on this? Can we move on? So that is all about cross elasticity of demand, right? And apart from that, you just need to know how to do the calculation part, which is very simple. So you will be given values, four values that you have to do. So let's say this is the demand for Coke, uh, right? So the demand for Coke was, let's say, 10,000 bottles per month, per week, whatever, right? And then this was when the price of Pepsi was, let's say, 50 rupees, right, per bottle or whatever, right? Now, when the price of Pepsi drops to, let's say, um, the price of Pepsi drops to 40 rupees, let's say, then the demand for Coke increases to, let's say, 12,000, right? So this being said, when you are provided these values, right? So let's say this is Q1, this was original quantity, right? This is Q2, which is the new quantity. Similarly, this is the original price of Pepsi and this is the new price for Pepsi, right? So what happens in this case, all you have to do is to first calculate the percentage change in demand for Coke. Sorry, I should have written Coke over here. Sorry, no, that's correct. That's correct. Yeah. Yeah. So how much is the change in demand for Coke, right? So first of all, you'll calculate this just by knowing that this is the new quantity. So how do you calculate the percentage change? New quantity minus old quantity, right? What is the old quantity, which was the previous number, Q1, original quantity, divided by old quantity into 100. So that will give you the percentage change in the demand for Coke, and this entire thing will be then divided by the percentage change in price for Pepsi, which would be, what is the new value? What is the new value? So each bottle is for 40. Previous price of each bottle of Pepsi was 50, divided by old price, which is 50 times 100, and that will give you this. So 0, 0, 100, 100 gets cancelled out, and then you can do the simple maths and get to find out the final value. Right? We good? Easy? Sorry, I think I did a mistake. So when the price of Pepsi is going down, so the demand for Coke should go down. My bad. My bad, my bad, my bad, my bad. Right? So then it will give you a positive number. Right? Right. Yeah. Good check. Good check. Yes. Yeah. So Khadija, that's correct. Yeah. So I just realized I made a mistake. Yeah, right. That's correct. But don't worry. For substitute goods, you will always be given values that are correct. Right? Okay. Very good. Let's move on. Now, moving forward, we will talk about income elasticity of demand. Right? Now, what is income elasticity of demand? So income elasticity of demand is the fourth and the final measure of elasticity that captures how much will be the change in demand for a good due to change in consumer income. Due to change in consumer income, how much will be the change in demand for a product, right? So by now you might have guessed the formula. Can anyone of you tell me what do you expect to be, expect the formula of this to be, right? So income elasticity of demand. So how will we measure this? Right. Yeah. Quantity not divided by change in income. Exactly. Very good. Excellent. Zohan, that's correct, right? So you would know that in all the cases, you must have seen that the demand or the supply thing comes in the numerator. So it will be percentage change in quantity demanded for any good due to percentage change in consumer income. So what we basically try to capture in this case is that due to change in consumers' income, how much will be the change in the demand for the good? How much will be the change in demand for the good, right? Nothing but this. Exactly. Now, most products, now you have to listen to this very carefully. Now, in fact, let me, instead of explaining you simply, let me give you some examples. So let's say this is someone's income and that person's income is going up, right? Now I'm writing certain products and you need to tell me that what will happen with the demand for those things. Right. So if this person is fond of going to fancy restaurants, right, how will that demand be affected when your incomes go up? Um, right. Uh, right. Right. So I've listed how many products? Right. So I've listed 1, 2, 3, right? 5 products, right? So for these 5 products, you have to tell me what do you expect the demand, what do you expect the demand of these products to happen to these products if the price of the consumer, if sorry, income of consumer is increasing. So if consumer's income is increasing, how do you expect this to be affected? So first of all, fancy restaurants. Would the demand increase? Exactly. So the demand for fancy restaurants will go up. Why? Because with more incomes, you can more easily afford fancy restaurants. Now, Oppo, for those of you who don't know, Oppo is a mobile brand which produce a little cheaper version of the phones, right? So the demand for Oppos would go down because now you can afford more expensive brands like Samsung, Apple, I don't know, other brands, right? Second-hand books, right? So why would you want to buy second-hand books when you have higher income? Most probably this will go down. What about expensive wristwatches? With more income, you can more easily afford these. So that will go up. And what about cheap restaurants? Again, you will not go to cheap restaurants, most probably. Yes or no? Some people might still, but are you getting me? So now what we realized out of this practice that it's not always, I didn't know that, right? So Oppo is a good brand. Okay, maybe. Yeah. So what happens that it's not always direct relationship. Students, it's not always a direct relationship. Please remember, right? So it's not always that when the consumer income increases that the demand for every product will go up. No. And similarly, it's not that whenever the income of consumer goes down, the demand for every product will go down. No, not always, right? In some cases, they are normal goods. So normal goods are the ones that I've just explained. Technically I haven't explained yet. So normal goods with goods like these, fancy restaurants, normal good. Higher the income, higher the demand, lower the income, lower the demand because you can't afford. Similarly, expensive wristwatches are also normal good. We call it normal good. Why? Because more the income, more the demand for expensive watches, lower the income, lower the demand for expensive watches. Easy, making sense, right? But these other three products are inferior goods. So Oppo, higher the income, lower the demand, lower the income, higher the demand, right? And similarly for the second-hand books, if I have higher income, I will not buy second-hand books much. If I have lower income, I will buy more second-hand books, right? Similarly for the cheap restaurants, if I have higher incomes, I will not go to cheap restaurants. If I have lower income, I'll go more to cheaper restaurants, right? So there are basically two things in income elasticity of demand. So whether it will be normal good, higher the income, higher the demand, and vice versa, or it will be inferior good, right? Which means opposite relationship, right? Higher the income, lower the demand, lower the income, higher the demand. How many of you got me over here? Easy? Is it making sense, students? Right? So this being said, one more example, and then we will be good with this. And tomorrow we'll practice some essay questions related to this topic because that's very important topic from exam point of view. And it's important to understand whatever questions are asked and how do you answer those. Okay. Now my question to you is, think about this. Food, right? Basic food items. Expensive restaurants, right? Now, would you expect the demand for both the products to be normal or inferior? Right. So if your incomes are increasing, would you consume more of both the things or what? Or less of one of these two things, right? Do you all agree with Khizr? So Khizr is saying that when your incomes increase, you will consume more of both the products. Is that correct? Right. Yes. Yes, exactly. Now think about this. For both the products, your demand should increase when you have higher incomes. So when I have higher incomes, I will not only spend on basic food items, I might also buy a lot of fruits. I also buy a lot of, juices. I also might buy a lot of, special cheese, blah, blah, blah. So the demand for food will increase. But in the case of expensive restaurants, the demand might increase even more given the fact that now I can much easily afford it. Because think about this, food, there is a limit to how much food I can consume. So if I can eat one plate, normal diet, whatever someone's diet is, right? XYZ amount of food per day. So it's not that with higher incomes, you'll start eating, double that amount. You can't eat that. That's not even humanly possible, right? But you might start going even more to the expensive restaurants. So there will be a direct relationship, but the value of this might be lower than the value of this, right? So with expensive restaurants, it's a bigger value. Why? Because it's more elastic. It's normal good. Positive sign shows higher the income, higher the demand for fancy restaurants, but it's more elastic. There will be greater increase in the demand for fancy restaurants when your income increase. So here again, it's a positive sign, which means higher income, higher demand for food, but not that much. But not that much. Food is like you're consuming already, but you'll get higher quality. Exactly. It will not affect the demand. Very good explanation, right? Students, are we good on this? So we'll stop here for today. Tomorrow we'll continue from here, right? And we'll practice some essay questions, and there you'll get a better chance to understand what this is, right? And then we'll be closing up with unit 2 and then move on with unit 3, most probably in our Friday's class. No, on the class on Monday, right? We good, students? Right? Okay. Take care. Have a good night, and I'll see you tomorrow. Bye. Allah Hafiz.